You do not join because you love bureaucracy. You join because your life has narrowed to invoices, tired mornings, and the faintly insulting realization that your current job has all the glamour of an Asda shopping trolley with one wheel missing. Rent goes first. Bills follow. The rest disappears with the elegance of a cancelled train. Then the police recruitment page lands in your inbox, and suddenly a uniform, a pension, and a career with an actual ladder look less like ambition and more like escape. It is not a glamorous thought. It is a useful one. The academy strips the shine off quickly. Policing is not a parade of dramatic arrests and noble speeches. It is law, procedure, safeguarding, report writing, and radios that seem designed to fail at the exact moment you need them most. You learn how to search properly, how to detain correctly, how to speak clearly, and how to write a statement that can survive being examined by someone who has spent their entire day looking for weaknesses in other people's sentences. It turns out the job is less about looking important and more about staying useful while everyone else is having a mildly theatrical crisis. Your first rank is Constable, and the title sounds more commanding than the reality. You are the one sent first, kept longest, and asked to explain everything afterwards. Your tutor constable is part teacher, part warning, showing you where confidence ends and competence begins. You earn in the low to mid £30,000 depending on force and entry route, which feels respectable until shifts start rearranging your life around nights, weekends, and a sleep pattern that makes weekday existence feel like a rumour. Your first difficult call comes early, a domestic incident. The house is too quiet before you knock, then too loud once you enter. One person is crying, one is furious, one is insisting they are fine in the exact tone people use when they are absolutely not fine. You listen, separate, record, and try not to let your own nerves leak into the room. Nobody in the house cares that you are new. They care whether you are calm enough to help. That is your first real lesson. Policing is not about showing authority. It is about borrowing calm when the situation has none. The next call is less dramatic and somehow more exhausting. A shoplifting report that becomes refusal, denial, a search, a statement, and a long stretch of standing in a fluorescent lit room while someone explains that technically the system is the problem. They say this while keeping the stolen items, which is a bold approach to philosophy. You learn that public confidence in being wrong is one of the most reliable things in the country. At this level, the skill that matters most is control. Not dominance. Control. You learn how to enter a room and lower the temperature. You learn how to ask questions without sounding like an accusation machine. You learn when someone is lying, when they are frightened, and when they are both. You also learn that people become passionately supportive of law and order, provided it is aimed at someone else that isn't guilty. What you do each day is easy to list and exhausting to live. You attend calls, make arrests, protect victims, transport prisoners, take statements, complete checks, safeguard vulnerable people, and write reports that will be read later by people who did not witness the scene and will still have opinions. The day never stays where it starts. One incident folds into the next. Lunch becomes a belief rather than a meal. Your body starts accepting broken hours as normal, and your mind learns to carry the emotional residue home without introducing it to anyone. The hidden map of the job takes longer to learn. You do not yet know which addresses are always trouble, which names should make you more careful, which regular callers need structure more than sympathy, or how many one-off incidents are actually symptoms of something much older and uglier. That is where innocence begins to break. Not in a dramatic moment, in a practical one. You stop believing good intentions are enough. They matter, they just aren't sufficient. The first small wins are oddly moving. A victim thanks you for listening properly. A suspect stops performing because you refuse to play along. A custody sergeant treats your paperwork as acceptable rather than medically alarming. A senior colleague asks what you think, and for a brief moment you realise you have become someone whose view can shape the next decision. That is how competence arrives in policing. Not with applause, but with quiet recognition. You also begin to see why people leave. The pay rises with experience, eventually moving toward the high £40,000 or around £50,000 with overtime and allowances depending on force. The money gets better, the sleep does not. The work follows you home more often. Shift patterns bend family life, emotional fatigue builds slowly, and public criticism has a habit of arriving from people who have never spent 10 minutes doing the thing they are now confidently explaining. That is not unique to policing, but policing does seem to attract it with unusual commitment. Still, you stay long enough to become the person newer officers look at when a scene turns complicated. That feels good for approximately 3 seconds, until someone asks where the forms are, whether the arrest is solid, or what happens next, and you are returned to earth like everyone else. The next rung appears because you want more influence, more money, and because every good constable eventually develops the slightly dangerous belief that the shift would run better if someone competent were in charge. That is how sergeants happen. As a sergeant, you stop being only the person who does the work and become the person who decides what gets done first, by whom, and with what risk attached. Your salary moves into the £50,000 depending on the force. It sounds like a promotion until you realise it partly pays for carrying everyone else's mistakes as well as your own. That is the sort of detail rarely emphasised in recruitment brochures. Your shift begins with a briefing, which is technically about the day ahead and practically about the problems already in motion. Staffing is thin. Incidents are building. Victims need updates. Suspects are outstanding. Welfare issues are active. The radio is speaking in clipped fragments like a machine with a grudge. You are allocating resources, reviewing arrests, checking safeguarding, supervising statements, and making sure your team does not confuse courage with recklessness. A good sergeant is not simply the loudest officer in the room. A good sergeant notices the quiet warning signs. The probationer getting sloppy, the experienced officer getting short, the one smiling too much because they are one call away from becoming a problem. This is the rank where the job becomes less about action and more about judgment under scarcity. You decide which incident gets immediate response and which must wait. You decide when to push, when to pause, when to intervene, and when to let an officer do the job they are perfectly capable of doing. You also decide whether a mistake becomes a lesson or a complaint. The public calls you boss, usually in the tone of someone who wants something impossible, disagrees with something obvious, or believes you personally control the weather, the law, and the parking situation. The humour gets drier here because it has to. You start speaking fluent rota politics. You learn that just a quick update means 25 minutes of your life are about to vanish. And manage expectations is usually management language for this is going to be your problem whether you like it or not. That kind of humour is not decoration. It is survival with better timing. Promotion to inspector changes the scale again. Now you are managing risk across an area, a shift, or a department. The pay climbs into roughly the £60,000 range depending on force and allowances, but so does the weight of every decision. The calls are bigger now. Critical incidents, major safeguarding cases, staffing gaps, public confidence issues, partner agency coordination, and the eternal expectation that you can make impossible things happen on schedule. Every decision has a downstream effect, which is the polite way of saying that one mistake can become tomorrow's complaint, review, or headline. A major incident lands in your lap and shows you what that means. A vulnerable person goes missing. The clock starts immediately. Officers are deployed, intelligence is checked, partner agencies are contacted, and the room fills with the quiet panic of people pretending not to be panicking. You make the call that changes the next hour. That is the difference. At constable level, you are responsible for your actions. At inspector level, you are responsible for the shape of the response itself. You begin to see how much of policing depends on tired people doing difficult things quietly. Missing person cases, serious assaults, family harm, and public order situations all arrive with the assumption that you will coordinate, calm, and contain. You are less visible to the public, but more responsible for what the public experiences. That can feel like maturity. It can also feel like distance. You do not get the immediate satisfaction of frontline work. Instead, you get a broader view and a heavier conscience. Chief Inspector is where the job changes again, because now you are no longer simply managing incidents or shifts. You are managing standards, performance, and the quality of the work being done across a wider patch. The pay rises, the responsibility thickens, and the easy comfort of direct control starts disappearing. You are expected to know where the pressure points are, which teams are struggling, which plans are failing, and which problems are quietly becoming expensive. At this rank, the work feels less like policing and more like supervising the machinery of policing. You spend more time checking whether the service is doing what it claims to be doing, and less time doing the visible work yourself. That is a different kind of power and a different kind of loneliness. The higher you go, the less anyone tells you the truth immediately. Superintendent is the point where the job becomes properly strategic. You are now dealing with force priorities, partnership pressure, resource allocation, and the awkward truth that everything important costs time, money, or both. The public expects visible policing. The organisation expects delivery. The officers below you expect clarity. You are the person standing in the middle, holding all three conversations at once, which is a fairly good definition of strain. At this rank, the job is less about what happens on the street and more about what the force decides to do. Next month, next quarter, and next year. You oversee long-term plans, major operations, performance issues, and the political reality that policing is never just about policing. It is about trust, confidence, budgets, and the kind of compromises that make perfect sense on paper and almost none in a custody suite at 2 in the morning. Chief Superintendent is the last step before executive command, and it feels like the point where you are close enough to see the top, but far enough away to know it will cost more than you first thought. Your visibility increases, your room for error shrinks, and your decisions begin to carry a public face. You are no longer just a manager of teams. You are a representative of the force itself. This rank has a strange energy. You are senior enough to shape the direction of local policing, but not insulated enough to avoid the consequences. You attend the meetings that matter, answer the questions that are politically delicate, and live with the knowledge that every word can be turned into a briefing note, a complaint, or a headline if someone feels motivated enough. The job becomes less operational and more reputational, which is not as glamorous as it sounds. It is mostly pressure in a cleaner shirt. The next rung, Commander, changes the tone completely. Now you are in executive leadership. You are thinking about budgets, culture, major incidents, safeguarding, public confidence, and the wider reputation of the organisation. You are no longer a police officer who manages a service. You are a leader inside a public institution that can be praised, blamed, measured, and misunderstood all at once. At this level, the decisions stop being local and become systemic. You can improve training, shift priorities, strengthen welfare, influence standards, and change the tone of the organisation. You can also inherit the consequences of decisions made years earlier by people who have long since moved on. That is the quiet trick of senior command. It turns the past into your present without asking permission. Deputy Commissioner is where the job sits, one step from the top, and therefore one step from being answerable for everything. You are no longer just helping to run the force. You are helping to define what the force is. The work is now political, strategic, and public in a way that makes private life feel smaller every year. Your calendar fills with senior meetings, governance, scrutiny, and the constant effort to keep the service credible while reality keeps arriving with awkward news. This rank should feel like being close to the ceiling and finally understanding that the ceiling is made of expectations. You have influence, but not freedom. You have authority, but not anonymity. You can move things, but you cannot move everything. The pressure is no longer a spike. It is the shape of the role itself. Commissioner is the final version of that idea. You are now the person ultimately accountable for the whole organisation. The public sees the title and imagines power. The truth is more complicated. You have the broadest authority and the least room to hide. Every failure can be traced upward. Every success is expected. Every crisis lands at your feet eventually, even if it begins miles away from your office. This is where policing stops looking like a career and starts looking like stewardship. You are responsible for culture, direction, reputation, standards, budgets, confidence, and the million quiet choices that determine whether a force becomes trusted or merely tolerated. You can make things better. You can also spend an entire week trying to solve a problem that has 3 causes, 2 owners, and a political dimension that nobody mentioned until it became urgent. And yet you stay. Not because it is easy, not because it is pure. You stay because underneath the bureaucracy, the forms, the rota arguments, the budget meetings, and the tired humour, the job still offers something rare, the chance to be useful when things are at their worst, to steady other people when they are unravelling, and to carry responsibility without needing applause. That is not glamorous. It is better than glamorous.
If you don't mind taking a second, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated.